I am Jake Senholz here for Week 15 already. Cannot believe we are 15 weeks into the NFL season. It's depressing. But hey, first of all, I think we should give the NFL credit. I was kind of thinking about this the other day. They maybe screwed over a few individual teams in certain situations, and they had to mix up the schedule a little bit. But I had big concerns that, especially late in the season, things were going to get messed up. Teams weren't going to be able to play their games. We were going to have to, have a mess right before playoffs. NFL has pretty much figured it out as a whole all season, so we are in Week 15 already, and it's not gone off without a hitch completely, but, we've gotten 15 full weeks of football, so good on the NFL for that, and congratulations to those of you tuning in tonight. I'm assuming you won your first-round matchup. You've moved on in your playoffs. I was the number one seed in my big money league all year long. I ended up losing the number one seed in the last week of the regular season by 0.48 points for a season total. I lost it to my little brother. And the person who beat me in the final week to take away my number one seed, I played them again last week and the first week of the playoffs, and he beat me again. So I lost the last 2 weeks to the same person, and I am now out of the running for the championship. So fantasy football to me is pretty much over for the season. I guess I can play for third place in that league. But I'm the commissioner.
Jake, I'm pretty sure you and I have a Dynasty semifinal against one another this
yes,
weekend.
So Dynasty.
Maybe I should have reminded you.
Well, no, I always check my Dynasty, and it is, for some reason, it's I classify it different. It's my 5 or 6 leagues that I have, and then the Dynasty League, and I always think of them as separate entities. I guess I'm not sure why I do that, but Dynasty surprising to me this year, the amount of success I've had. I didn't really love my team going into the season, just to be completely honest. I had never been in a Dynasty League before. I didn't realize, I knew there was different draft strategy, and you want to draft for now, but also, plan for the future, things like that. I pretty much just treated it like a regular year of fantasy, so next year might be messy for me. But yeah, I'm doing pretty well in the Dynasty League. But I've tried to pick up probably, without exaggeration, 12 to 15 different guys in that league, and nobody's there. So I haven't been able to pick up anybody all season long. So next season will definitely be interesting, but if I could get a win under my belt to start off the Dynasty League, I'd be set for the next couple of years. So yeah, I guess it's me and Henry in the semifinals. We'll keep you updated. We'll let you know next week how that one goes. I think I'm 9-4 in that league. I'm not quite sure. I'm approaching double-digit wins. Anyhow, it is the Thursday night fantasy start sit show. Coach blessed us with another article here, as always. And starting off, maybe the most familiar name. Well, actually, that's not true. We haven't. Coach has kind of avoided him for the last 6+ weeks here, but it has been a hot name all season long. It is Tom Brady. He's facing the Falcons this weekend. Oh, by the way, those of you who watch us every week, you know this, but we are brought to you by monkeyknifefight.com. Use the promo code Flurry at sign up. You're going to get $5 in your account completely for free, and a 100% deposit match all the way up to $50. So check out monkeyknifefight.com. I know they got some fun things in store and some cool contests planned when we get to NFL playoffs, but you might as well get your feet wet and use up that free $5 before the playoffs so you can kind of get acquainted to their website, how things work, and figure out the best way that you can make some cash from Monkey Knife Fight on Sunday. We also, of course, have a game tonight between the Chargers and the Raiders. I don't think you've got anybody on either of those teams in this article, do you, Coach? I don't think from scanning that you.
So I do actually under wide receiver.
Okay. I see it. I see it here. So we'll address that in not too long here, so we can get that discussed before kickoff. But it is the Raiders and the Chargers here tonight. But let's jump back to the quarterback, starting with Tom Brady at the Falcons. I liked Tom Brady a lot last week. I thought he was going to have a much bigger performance than what we saw. The same goes for Mike Evans. I thought Mike Evans would have a two-tutty type day. And for those of you who watched this last week or follow me on Twitter, Damian Harris accidentally got started over Mike Evans, and I really thought that was going to, cripple my chances. They really didn't have that big of a deficit between their final points, but Tom Brady. We also had the argument, you and I did, Henry, Tom Brady versus Justin Herbert, and they ended up scoring like within 0.3 something points of each other last week, so it was pretty much dead even there. But Tom Brady set up for another big week, or a bigger week this week against the Falcons. Late season divisional game against a team that is just not as good as the Buccaneers. The Bucs need this win to solidify, playoff positioning. Still trying to win that division, so pretty much everything leaning in the favor of the Buccaneers here. Coach, outside of those reasons, what makes you think Tom Brady's going to have a big week against the Falcons defense here this week?
Yeah, and anyone that has been reading the article all year, or if this is your first time reading it, the common thread throughout most of the article has been start your quarterbacks against the Falcons. They are still dead last against quarterbacks on the year. They've kind of come back to the pack a little bit, but they're still giving up 23.8 fantasy points a game. Tom Brady's set up in the next 2 weeks for a couple nice matchups. Next week he has Detroit as well. He's been pretty consistent throughout the year. He's had multiple touchdowns in all but 3 games this year. And this is probably the best matchup he's actually seen all year. I think that with his trio of wide receivers and Gronk there at tight end, I think he's set up to get your team to the Super Bowl in your leagues.
And Henry, I guess maybe you were not as high on Tom Brady last week as I was. What are your feelings towards him this week against these Falcons?
Well, I think the way any team is going to beat Atlanta is through the air. Falcons actually surprisingly decent at stopping the run. I have Brady in the top 10 this week. I still don't love it, just given the fact, even last week, the Buccaneers kind of escaped with a win there. And I actually wrote about this for betting a little bit earlier today. And, everyone's kind of like, oh, Tampa Bay's fine, they're back, blah, blah. They got dominated in terms of times of possession. And if Dan Bailey can make a kick, we could be looking at a very different game there. So I don't love it, but I think you have to respect him. The matchups, like Coach said, is too good to pass up here. And he shouldn't have any trouble. And the other thing I'll throw out there with this game, too, is with the status of Ronald Jones kind of being uncertain, that could lead to the Bucs kind of, if they're going to run the football, running it through the middle with Leonard Fournette, or could play into Atlanta's hands defensively, and that's only going to put more onus on Brady to throw.
Yeah, and Leonard Fournette, a healthy scratch last week, so I really didn't dig into what was happening there, if they just felt they didn't need him or he had a bad week at practice. Not quite sure. But you're totally right. The Vikings did a whole heck of a lot to not only help the Buccaneers win that game, but to cover in that game as well. And then you look, at a game like, say, the Chiefs and the Dolphins, and yeah, the Chiefs turned the ball over a lot, but at one point they were up by multiple scores. They had all the offensive momentum, and they didn't end up covering in that game. So that's football for you. Both of those were, I believe, 7-point spreads, and the Bucs had no business covering, and they managed to. The Chiefs probably should have covered, and they didn't. So, that's how that one goes. But I like Tom Brady. I've pretty much locked him in as my starting quarterback in my family's league all season long, without even really, shuffling it around too much. He's had some highs, he's had some lows, but I think, like I said, interdivision game in a spot that the Bucs need here against the Falcons, I like Tom Brady. And then would you look at this? Jalen Hurts start against the Cardinals. Coach, I love it. I love it not only because of my bet that we made last week against Henry, but I love it because I think Jalen Hurts proved he can do something, obviously at over 100 yards on the ground. I really wish from a betting standpoint that he wouldn't have done so well and beat the Saints, but, I digress. That's I still can't get over my pain from last week, but that's a different issue. Jalen Hurts himself played quarterback at a higher level than we've seen Carson Wentz play in weeks. And he showed the ability to be somewhat dynamic, and that was his first start. So, now that Doug Peterson knows what he can handle, knows that he has a potential playmaker in the backfield, or under center, I should say. I think we're going to see even more creative stuff out of Jalen Hurts. I think we're going to see a pretty quality start. Maybe I'm guessing a 20-plus point performance. He had 16 last week, 16 and a half around there against the Saints team, which came in super, super hot, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Cardinals defense just does not compare to what the Saints have been offering in recent weeks. So I like Jalen Hurts as a start as well. Coach, we'll give Henry a chance to rebuttal here. But what else? If you had to give Jalen Hurts, if you had to, pinpoint the one reason you think he's a quality start this week, what is it? Is it the rushing ability? Did you see something out of his passing game? Is it a scheme? Why do you like Jalen Hurts this week?
Yeah, so it all comes down to running for him. He's not shy about putting it on the ground. He played a quarter against the Packers, had 5 rushing attempts. He played a full game this past week against the Saints, ran the ball 18 times. So right there, you're getting basically a RB1 type usage. And then anything he adds in the passing game is going to be on top of that. So I think when you're looking at, starting off with a floor of let's just kind of low end give him, he had 109 yards rushing last week. Let's just say he gets 60 this week. You start with 6 points, possibility of a touchdown on the ground. Let's just give him half that. So we'll give him 9 points. He got about a 9-point base out of him. And then anything he gets passing is going to be on top of that. So even if he throws for 150 yards, that's another 6 points. And then if he finds the end zone, that's 20 points right there. So you're looking at, last week he had 19 fantasy points. Now, I'm not going to go crazy. I'm not going to say he's a top-level starter this week. I did play him in a lot of DFS lineups last week because he was minimum price, and I thought that there was some upside there. Still do this week. His price is pretty low. But it's the rushing ability. And then the Cardinals actually have given up saw this stat. They've given up over 20 yards. I want to say it was like 8 times this year was the stat I saw. And so they've actually given up over 300 and some yards rushing to quarterbacks on the ground as well. So I think he makes for a fine start, especially if you have like a Taysom Hill and you've been riding him and Drew Brees is coming back and you're kind of in a pinch or you're streaming quarterbacks and might not like what you have. I think he makes for a great, solid play this week. So
yeah, I misspoke. I guess it was probably the last time I looked, he had like 16 and a half, 17 points somewhere in that region, but he ended up with 19.28, and that was with a fumble loss towards the end of the game. So without that fumble, you are looking at that 20-plus point performance. Henry, I'm going to let you be on the other side of this. If you have any reason to be, I would like to hear your rebuttals and the places where you think Jalen Hurts could possibly struggle.
Well, I think my biggest rebuttal as far as starting him, looking at where we're at this point in the season, fantasy playoffs, semifinals, you've probably gotten there with a decent team already. There's just a lot of other quarterbacks I'd rather start over him, I think, this week. I mean, even just looking at my rankings here, Jared Goff against the Jets, I'd rather have him. Roethlisberger, Phillip Rivers against the Texans, Derek Carr. I have Hurts as the quarterback 16. The Cardinals not bad against the position this year, under 18 fantasy points per game. I know Jalen Hurts kind of has a unique skill set, not a lot of tape on him necessarily at this point in the NFL. I don't know. I'm not convinced just yet that he's someone that I want to be running out there with a playoff game here on the line in terms of fantasy. The other thing, too, we saw Zach Ertz come back last week, and he played a healthy amount of snaps, and Goddard was still the tight end 1 for the Eagles. So that's something else I'm interested in watching this week, not only for this season fantasy the rest of the way, but going forward, it feels like Hurts is the odd man out. And whether Jalen Hurts is the quarterback going forward there in Philadelphia or not, that tight end battle is just something else I'm watching in Philadelphia right now.
So the other interesting thing about Jalen Hurts, like you said, I think the most valid point that you can make is like you said, you're at this point in your fantasy season, especially if you're going for a win. Like, do you really want to roll the dice on a guy like Jalen Hurts right now? With
Right.
you do. There is very little tape, but there's also very little proof. So it could go. It could go either way. So I do agree with you there. I think maybe if you're not in the running for a championship, you're more comfortable starting him. Or otherwise, maybe I just don't think there's many guys out there that are like dealing with injury right now or something where you would be potentially going for a championship and in a pinch where you absolutely need to start him. So I'm not quite sure how many people are in that position, but hey, if you're going for third place or consolation or something, and you want to change things up or you want to cheer for Jalen Hurts, I say throw him in there. He was able to put up 30 points in his last 5 quarters of football. So I would think he's got a good chance to keep it going against the Cardinals. The other fun thing about this game would be if you could find a book on total rushing yards between Kyler Murray and Jalen Hurts. I think that'd be a fun prop to bet on this weekend. So a couple things to keep in mind there just to kind of chew on as we move forward to our sits. Coach, you got Baker Mayfield coming off the Giants. Against the Giants, coming off maybe the best game of his career, just overall, team-wise, the way that he played, playmaking-wise, the way he was able to move the ball down the field in less than a minute when it mattered. Like, everything was going well for Baker Mayfield. Do you see a drop-off this week coming after such, almost near perfection, as close as you can be, in a Monday night thriller? Do you see a letdown opportunity coming against the Giants, or is this more about the Giants' defense? What is it about Baker Mayfield that you don't like this weekend?
Yeah, and so I just want to go back to Jalen Hurts for one more second here. I actually have him ranked at number 14 this week, so I don't have him as an upper level QB1, but in a pinch, I think he makes sense. And I do like him in DFS, especially in like a tournament. He allows you to save at quarterback, so I think. But definitely, it's not a move for the faint of heart. I mean, it's one of those that you kind of have to. But when I do the math on these running quarterbacks, they just give you such a nice floor that pretty much anything you can get through the air is gravy.
And I do like him for DFS a lot. I will throw that out there as well. DFS for sure. Yeah. And maybe people that are watching us are watching for a DFS type aspect because they're not in the running for first place in their fantasy. So still very valuable information here regarding Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, and then moving on to Baker Mayfield, and this kind of concerns Jalen Hurts as well. There's just so many good quarterbacks in the league that I have Baker Mayfield this week. I have him down at 19 going into this week, and the matchup this week is against the Giants defense that has actually been pretty tough against opposing quarterbacks. They're giving up 16.5 fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks, and they've gone up against Seattle. They had Seattle in a game there and kept Russell Wilson relatively contained there. And they're giving up 18.7 fantasy points a game to opposing running backs. So I just think this is going to be a game where Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, I think Nick Chubb's lock him in RB1. I think Kareem Hunt's pretty locked in RB2. And so I just see this being a game where Cleveland could come out there and be content running the ball, 35 times. I could see this being that type of game where it's a ground and pound type of game. And with the Giants kind of being a run funnel defense, I just think there's multiple other starts rather than trying to ride the hot streak with Baker Mayfield at this point.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it had to do with the situation and the way that the game was going back and forth on Monday. Baker needed to step up, make all those plays, everything like that. That probably won't be the case against the Giants. I really doubt him and Daniel Jones are going to have the same type of back and forth exchanges that him and Lamar / Trace McSorley for a few possessions there did. So yeah, I think it's a game too where Baker Mayfield maybe takes a step back, lets his the other offensive guys do it, and I think you're totally right with the ground and pound type situation here against the Giants. I have no clue what the weather's supposed to be like at MetLife this weekend, but New York is getting drenched with snow right now, or has been in the last couple weeks. So who knows? That could also play a factor as well. Henry, any thoughts on Baker Mayfield against the Giants this weekend?
Yeah, I woke up to a nice blanket of white stuff outside my window this morning, so the snowboarder in me is quite hyped for the next few weeks, and I'm here for a white Christmas as well. Talking about Baker Mayfield, I agree. I really don't want a whole lot to do with him this week. I think the Giants have to bounce back from last week against Arizona, and that's going to start with the defense for them, which it started with the defense for them all year here as they've made this run to somehow, some way contend for a playoff spot. So top 5 in fantasy points allowed to the position. I'm more than happy to stay away from Mayfield. I think the Browns want to run the football. The Giants would like to defend the run. One of those things is going to have to give, but I don't think either one of them really bode well for Baker Mayfield necessarily having a big game here. We do have a chat question too. I missed it. I apologize to the viewer, but
go ahead.
Whenever you're ready. So it's receiver based. It's regarding tonight's game. We're looking at Keenan Allen or Nelson Aguilar, so opposite sides of this Thursday night matchup. But, of course, Allen kind of rumored to be limited here. He's going to be active, but rumored to be limited is the latest I'm seeing heading into tonight. So I don't know if you guys have any thoughts.
Yeah, so we'll tie this into Coach does have in his sit section in the wide receivers, every wide receiver on Thursday Night Football not named Keenan Allen. And I know Zach did tweet out that Mike Williams also going to be active. So these guys will be active, but like you said, maybe limited participation. Don't really kind of know what their role is going to be. Nelson Aguilar, I've said it before. It's been very hard for me to get a read on him. I sit him and he has 13 points. I start him and he has 4 points. So I will leave this one to Coach. Coach, do you like Keenan Allen? I know obviously you have everybody except for Keenan Allen as a sit, but do you like him tonight? And compare him to Aguilar for us.
Yeah, so going into tonight's game, I've got Keenan Allen moved down. When I wrote this article last evening, I thought Keenan Allen, I didn't think he'd be on a snap count. So I did downgrade him based off of that news. I still like him more so than Nelson Aguilar. Keenan Allen has really been Justin Herbert's number one. I mean, the target volume he's getting in this offense, going back 4 weeks against the Jets, 19 targets, at Buffalo 10, New England 11, Atlanta 11, and pretty much he's only had 2 games with less than 10 targets since Herbert was thrust into the starting role. In PPR leagues, that's such a high floor. I mean, he's been double digits in points every week since week 2. And week 1, he had 8 fantasy points, and that was Tyrod Taylor at the helm, and that was a pretty defensive-minded game. With Nelson Aguilar, I get it. He looks like the number 1 receiver there in Oakland in Las Vegas, excuse me, third city. He looks like the number 1, and Henry Ruggs is out this week. I get it. I get the temptation there. The question that I have is, I think Amari Cooper is one of the more talented wide receivers in the league, and he was so inconsistent with Derek Carr at the helm. I just don't know if I trust Derek Carr necessarily enough to have Nelson Aguilar to start him with the playoffs on the line. And so I'm going to go back to what I've said before. When you have a tough decision, especially at this time of year, which decision can you live with and which one are you not going to kick yourself with at the end of the day? And I think if you start Aguilar and Keenan Allen outperforms him, I think you're kicking yourself. Whereas I think if you start Keenan Allen and Aguilar happens to outproduce him, which I don't think he does, I don't think you're kicking yourself. I think you're saying I started the best player.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I also think, is Josh Jacobs a full go tonight? I think, is he fully healthy? Because that might factor into it a little bit if you're able to use your best player and run the ball more against the Chargers. Maybe that plays into a tiny bit. I'm looking back over both of their stats right now, and I like what I've seen out of Aguilar for the past, basically 4 out of 5 weeks. But then you look to Keenan Allen, and man, he's had a season. I think it's been like sneaky one of the better seasons for any wide receiver in the entire NFL, especially when you consider, working with a rookie QB and all that stuff. 4 weeks ago, he had 16 catches in one game. That's wild to me. Followed it up with still some pretty good performances after that. He had a 20-point performance last week. Aguilar had a 21-point performance last week. So it's not like you can really, ride the hot hand per se. They've both been hot lately. So I don't know. Unless Henry's got something that can convince me of Aguilar here, I think you may have talked me into Allen.
Yeah, I don't really have a strong lean, I would say, one way or the other. I would have to roll with Allen. I'm still going to rank him higher going into this game. And what does limited mean? He's going to be available on a limited basis, limited snap count here. With Anthony Lynn, that could mean anything. So I'm going to roll with the stud. It's the fantasy playoffs. Interesting to your point, Jake, about maybe trying to run the ball more. Jacobs is healthy. The total for this game has crashed down. I don't know if there's been buyback since I was looking this afternoon, but it opened 55 down to 51.5 was last I was seeing. So just interesting to note there. A lot of people, I think, banking on a shootout tonight. Both defenses aren't really that great. Might be some sharper heads than us who are looking the other way there, actually. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. I'm generally not too interested in starting tons of players on Thursday night anyway. That's just me. I don't know if I'm probably wrong with that gut assessment, but that's just how I roll. JAC, he's still in the chat here. Jack, JAC, I apologize if I'm whichever one it is. He's wondering also, he had that Keenan Allen question, but wants to know about Aaron Jones, Miles Sanders, or James Robinson. We're starting 2, and he is starting Eckler tonight, which in the one league I have Eckler, I'm also starting him tonight, regretfully, because I wish I could wait till Sunday.
Yeah. Thursday is always tough to make those decisions. I think my last final piece of information before we move on to the second question, or piece of advice, would be, trust yourself. Who's the guy you started most weeks? Who's the guy that's been most reliable for you? And just work with that. You don't have to go against it. You don't have to take risks. Just do what you've been doing that's gotten you to this spot. That's probably my biggest piece of advice. I like Aaron Jones just because, I've loved Aaron Jones every week. I think that he is a touchdown machine. I think no matter who he's playing, the offense relies on him and it runs through him, as much as it can when you're, playing on the same team as Aaron Rodgers. But I would like Aaron Jones for sure. And then I would have to look into the other 2 guys. I guess, Henry, let's start with you on this one. What do you think of these 3 running backs here?
Yeah, it would be Jones and James Robinson for me. Robinson's just too much of a workhorse for me to sit him. And I know last week wasn't ideal, but still almost 13 fantasy points in a game where he never found the end zone, a game where he was kind of scripted out of it when they fell behind so big early and had to push the ball down the field. That doesn't really bode well for check down passes or obviously running the football when you're talking about a running back in James Robinson. So Of the three, I would go Aaron Jones and James Robinson, but it's really close. I have them all. I think I have Sanders in my top 10, but they're all right there, if not in the top 10. I can double check on that when you guys
And
discuss.
Aaron Jones is the 5th ranked running back in the NFL right now, despite missing 2 weeks earlier on in the season. The only hesitation I would have with Jones is we've seen a bit of work coming out of Williams. Williams has been putting up good numbers for a backup running back. And as we move forward, the Packers now have the tiebreaker and the number 1 seed. You might try and, I don't know, not limit the snap count of Aaron Jones, but if you don't need him out there carrying the ball 20-plus times because Williams is getting the job done and you're up by, 18 points on the Panthers or something like that, that would be my only slight hesitation with Aaron Jones. But I think the production in the early running of the game is going to be there. I think he finds the end zone this week at least one time against Carolina. So even if he doesn't see a bunch of snaps later on in the game, I think he's still worthy of a start and should get you. Last week he only had 9.5 against Detroit. If you look back through his entire season, that was only his first a single-digit performance of the entire year. So even on letdown weeks, say 10 points 3 weeks ago, he follows it up with a 23-point performance. And then you go back a little bit further, 16 points, he follows it up with 22 points. So he always seems to have a bounce-back week, even though most of those numbers are still pretty darn good numbers to start with in the first place. But yeah, I would say he's a pretty safe start overall this weekend, even if he is limited in the second half. Coach, I think I'm going to roll with Henry. I like Robinson as well. Would you start the same guys as us, or you got an argument for Sanders?
Yeah, first off, I gotta say, what's the who's asking the question here? What's the name?
It is JAC. So Jack. There's a space between the J and the A though, so that's why I had to apologize. I wasn't sure which way to be saying it.
Yeah, well, Jack, that's a nice backfield you have there. Those are some good options to have. It's nice to have that luxury of depth at this point in the year.
Wonder if he's in a 6-man league or something.
Yeah, that's a 12-team league right there. You got some nice options here at this point. I'm going the same. I think that Aaron Jones is one of those guys that isn't a start every week. You don't take him out of the lineup unless you're playing in a 6-team league. And then as far as between Robinson and Sanders, I think again, just to piggyback off what Henry said about the workload here, he gets volume is king, right? We're always looking for the guys that are going to get plenty of touches, and James Robinson is it. He is the Jaguars' offense at this point in the season. Gardner Minshew's back. Maybe that changed a little bit, but and the other thing too is with a running quarterback, I think that does help Miles Sanders as well. The defenses can't just key on him. They have to worry about Jalen Hurts too. So I would say that. But the other knock on that is that down by the goal line, Jalen Hurts is also a threat to score touchdowns. So I think that kind of affects his bottom line as well. I think James Robinson gets too many touches, and I think Aaron Jones is a lock-em-in type guy. So I would go with those two as well.
So there you go. Hopefully he doesn't come out and Sanders doesn't come out and have, 3 touchdown type performance and make us all eat our words. But I don't really think you're going to have to worry about that too much. Like Coach said, you got a lock-em-in guy and a workhorse. Kind of hard to go against that. So thank you for the questions. If anybody else out there has any more, we will gladly field them for you. Or otherwise, let's jump back to the article here. Again, Coach recommending you start Tom Brady, Jalen Hurts, avoid Baker Mayfield, and the Dolphins and Patriots quarterbacks as well. Actually, did we even get there? Did we talk about the Dolphins Patriots quarterbacks? I don't believe we did, but it's let's just zoom over it real briefly. It's Cam Newton versus Tua. Tua's been good. He's been serviceable, but he's not been a guy that's blown up the stat sheet by any stretch of the imagination. Cam Newton has been tough to determine all season. Henry needs a big week out of Cam Newton this week because I feel a big week out of Jalen Hurts coming. But you guys have anything significant to say about either one of these quarterbacks? And I know Coach took it as far as to say, sit not only their quarterbacks, but their wide receivers and running backs on both teams. Last week, one of the reasons I lost 2 weeks in a row, I was telling you guys before I got on air, or no, that was when we were on air, I had Devontae Parker in 3 of my most important leagues, including my Dynasty League, and he had a big old goose egg and then left the game, didn't come back. So that hurt me very greatly. I also had Mecole Hardman on my bench, who went off for 25 points. So I had a 0 in my starting lineup and 25 on my bench. You just can't have that if you're trying to survive this late in the season. Just real briefly touching on this game, is there anybody on either one of these offenses you guys would consider touching? I guess, Henry, I'll propose this to you. Or do you agree with Coach? This is just a stay-away game on both sides.
Yeah, in terms of solid starts, I don't really have anything I'm overly interested in down in Miami this week. I think it's going to be a defensive-minded game. You look at the total; it's sitting at 41-ish. That screams low scoring. Looking at the Dolphins, I think specifically, even Bill Belichick is 20-5 as a head coach. Bill Belichick teams are 20-5 against rookie quarterbacks all time. So that doesn't bode well for Tagovailoa and a Miami offense that has been doing a little bit more of late than New England. And you look at the other side as well, the Dolphins' defense, the strength of their team. So I'm not overly excited. I think Damian Harris is kind of in that fringe RB2 territory, but there's other guys I would want over him. Let's see. The name I did want to bring up is Lynn Bowden with the Dolphins. Now, I don't know DeAndre Washington's status here, but Bowden kind of got some run last week. He's eligible as a running back and receiver in every league I am in. I know that. So if you're in a deeper league and you need a flex, kind of roll that way. I know he's like a fringe candidate for one of my teams. But that's not a whole heck of a lot going on here. I think you're just looking at short checkdowns and PPR value anyway with either of those guys. So.
Talk about a guy that does it all, though. I believe I saw that he has taken snaps at quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and there might have even been a defensive snap in there. So talk about a guy that does it all. I think overall, and I also heard, I didn't check this myself, but it was hard to believe. I think the Patriots, the stat I heard was that they are 2-5 in their last 7 in Miami, which is hard to believe, but, you start thinking back, and it's like, Miami does usually have their number. There was that, crazy loss a couple seasons ago where the Patriots lost the number 1 overall seed. So, from a betting standpoint on this game, I have no idea where to go because you think, they take care of business against the Dolphins, but then you look back at history and they just don't, and that's when the Patriots actually had a great team and had Tom Brady and everything like that. So this is a confusing one for me. I would not think it would be too much of a stretch to say that the Miami defense can outscore a lot of these offensive players as far as fantasy-wise. So, yeah, I think it's going to be defense. So maybe consider both of these defenses and none of these offensive players. Coach, what do you think about Bowden? And then I believe Henry said he also maybe would consider Harris in this game.
Yeah, Harris for me. Now when I write this, I'm looking at RB2. So everyone's well outside RB2 and wide receiver 2 and kind of quarterback 1. So everyone's outside of that range. I agree. Bowden is actually, especially on DraftKings here, I think he's minimum price. And so, here's a guy who's going to touch the ball probably through the air, 5 times or more. So you're looking at pretty nice floor and then a possibility of a ceiling game from him as well, where you could probably get 3 times salary or more. So to me, that's definitely playable. Or if you need a flex and you're in a pinch, PPR he might be an option. But yeah, that'd be about the only player. And I love the Dolphins as a streaming defense this week. I think that they match up really well with the Patriots, and I see this being a pretty low scoring game. I don't know. I don't really pay attention much to the betting lines, but the over under on this, you guys got a number on
I think
that?
Henry said it was 41.
Is it 41?
Yeah, it's around 41, 41 and a half.
Okay. Are you hitting the under on that, or?
I am staying away,
Yeah.
given that the best of the number is gone. But I mean, that it feels right. Like I don't see the winner having a whole heck of a lot more than 20 points. I don't think, and I don't know if the loser would even get there in this game. So
Yeah, so I don't really do a lot with over unders, but I look at them as far as like fantasy points and projections and such. And yeah, to me, that just seems I have a hard time seeing somebody scoring 17 points in this one between the two teams here. So
Yeah, like I said, there's an entire possibility that the defense of at least the Dolphins, maybe see what the Patriots can bring to the table too, but I would not be surprised if the Dolphins defense has a double-digit plus point performance, and a lot of these offensive guys just don't even get anywhere near that. So should be a interesting one to watch down in Miami this weekend between.
do have one question actually directly relating to this game. It's from Spencer again, after he took me out of the playoffs last week. Jake, he wanted to let you know, first of all, that you were wrong about defenses. Saints got him -1. The Cardinals had 20.
I thought about that.
I think we all agreed,
Trust
though,
me.
So that's not just
Trust
on
me,
you.
the Saints, dude. I don't know. I'm sure those of you who have seen it have seen how brutal the Saints loss was for me last weekend, and I thought about that the whole game. I was like, man, that was some, because I was so confident in it. I was like, against the rookie QB, and they're the hottest, and blah blah blah. So yes, I apologize for that. You were totally right. That was a wrong call for me, but just know that I suffered greatly by being wrong about that as well. The Saints completely screwed me, so apologize.
Well, he doesn't have anything to complain about because my team didn't do anything and he won. But his question for this week is directly relating to this Patriots-Dolphins game. He's looking at Lynn Bowden or Jacoby Myers, I'm assuming, for a flex play, given that it is a 16-team league that we're talking about here. So of the two, if we need to start one, do you guys have any strong preference?
I think it's, again, about your willingness to take a risk. We know kind of what Myers can offer. We have a lot more numbers and weeks to work with in his case, and Bowden has had basically only 2 weeks where he's mattered at all, and one of those was very average, the other one was pretty good. So again, I think it's all about your willingness to take risk here.
Yeah, I think monitoring the injury reports too going into the game for me would be huge. What is the status of Devontae Parker and the like there? So honestly, I'm kind of more comfortable starting guys against New England's defense at this point than I am the Dolphins. And maybe that's a little misleading just because Miami's been so good from a fantasy standpoint, getting turnovers and whatnot. Again, you have the Belichick track record against these rookie quarterbacks.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair, especially in a game that we're talking about. It's going to be a defensive game, and we don't like any of the offensive guys really in general. Then maybe it wouldn't be the best idea to play, to bet against the better of the two defenses. And when you're looking at Myers' numbers too, it's not like he's played for a majority of the season, and he had some good numbers back in like weeks 7 through 10-ish. But the last 4 weeks, he's been, very, very low on the totem pole, 3.5 points, 6.8 points, 8.7 points. So yeah, it's again, do you want to insure yourself a few points out of Myers and take the risk against Miami, or do you want to take the risk against the more unknown guy in Bowden, even though we just saw him put up 15 last week? But again, it's a tough decision to be making at this point, this late in the season, especially if you're going to roll with Bowden. He's like, he's one of those guys where it's just going to be a risk. It's the same thing as I was going back and forth all the way up to like a minute before lineups needed to be set last week with Kmet and Logan Thomas, because I was hearing Henry's voice in my head over and over and over, Kmet, like praising him, lifting him up, and I was like, do I take this risk or do I go with like the guy who I know is going to at least get me something, somewhere between 5 to 10 points in Logan Thomas? I ended up going with Thomas. It was the correct choice by like maybe 2 points, 2.5 points. I lost anyway, so it didn't really matter. But again, I think it plays into what coach says too. Start the better guy so you don't have to kick yourself. But in this case, I don't really know who's the better guy. So maybe it's about starting the guy who's playing the defense you're less confident in, and that would be obviously Bowden.
Yeah, I agree. I do think Bowden's the play. And the reason I'm going to go with is that I think I trust Tua a little bit more. He's probably got a longer leash at this point, I would think. And maybe Cam getting benched would be something that would actually be beneficial for Jacoby Myers. But I think Tua can check it down. And I think Bowden's probably got a higher floor. These Dolphins defensive backs, the cornerbacks, are pretty solid. And I don't know how the Patriots are going to complete many passes on them. So I think I probably go Bowden just because, and he's going to probably touch the ball in the running game a little bit as well.
Yeah, he's got that versatility, which in a game like this is like any way you can scrape together points is going to be helpful.
Yeah, and who knows, maybe they pull out something like the Wildcat. I remember a couple years back here, who was the Terrell Pryor for the Browns, I think. They put him out there. He was wide receiver eligible. He came out at quarterback, kind of similar to Taysom Hill when he was tight end eligible. It was the best of all worlds. I could see kind of some gadget plays here for Bowden this week too. I just think Myers is kind of still living off of that that one game that he had against the Jets, but he's been pretty quiet since then.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. He hasn't really – I mean, his last good performance was Week 10, and it was Week 9 the week before that he had the monster game against the Jets. So, I mean, we're talking many, many weeks ago at this point, and 3 out of his last 4 weeks didn't even add up basically to the amount of points he scored in Week 10 against Baltimore. So he's greatly fallen off. When you compare him to himself from a few weeks ago. Also, go ahead.
Sorry, you're good. That's all for questions. I was just gonna say I'm kind of inclined to agree. In the one league I had Myers, the one redraft league that is, I dropped him. I think it was a couple of weeks ago. Granted, not a 16-teamer here, but I feel like Bowden's the upside play.
I would agree. Miami, the better defense, the defense that has been turning the ball over a ton, playing against the quarterback who has a less ability to throw. And coach, like you said, Myers might benefit from Cam being benched, but we don't know anything about Stidham yet. Like, we've seen him such limited capacity. He came in last week and just got swallowed up in the same way that Cam Newton was. So I definitely can't even go out on a limb and say Stidham would be better off for Myers, especially coming in still in a backup role. I don't think either quarterback really bodes well for Myers. And my final point here is that coaches like to try and outcoach Bill Belichick. They like to try and draw up these crazy schemes and like get all cute against Bill Belichick to, I don't know, try and prove something or just show that they can coach with the best of them or something like that. So who knows? They could cook something up for Bowden, and maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but I think he's the upside play here. Alrighty. We are running kind of long already, so I'm going to just start grouping these guys together. We'll talk about the starts and the sits at the same time. Moving on to running backs. We talked a lot about Wayne Gallman in the past few weeks. He's established himself as a quality starting running back in the NFL and a quality starting running back in fantasy football as well. He's playing the Browns. We've already talked quite a bit about this game, about, it's probably going to be a ground game. Baker's probably going to take a step back. Daniel Jones did not look good last week, so they're probably going to lean heavily on Wayne Gallman, which makes total sense given the analysis that we provided for this game. And then the other one is Nyheim Hines against the Texans. I think this is much like the Buccaneers game. You're playing a division team who's worse than you. You are battling for playoff position. You just need to take care of business and get the best out of your playmakers here in these kind of games. I think we're going to see that out of Hines as well against the Texans. Chat us up, Coach, about both these guys here.
Yeah, with Wayne Gallman, just a reminder, he had his worst week as a starter last week. This is just a reminder that he's been one of the most consistent running backs here over the last 7 games, 10-plus PPR points in all of them. He's an RB2. Make sure you have him in your lineup. Don't lose the faith on him. As far as Nyheim Hines, it's a great matchup here. They're playing Houston. Houston's been terrible against running backs here. 26.2 fantasy points per game. So if you have Taylor, you're starting him as an RB1, and Nyheim Hines is an RB2 this week. And they've really, I think a few weeks back, we highlighted that the Colts running backs had just a beautiful schedule down the stretch here, and that I think the question was about Jonathan Taylor, about or trading for the Colts running backs, and we mentioned that they might be a good buy low at that point, and it really looks like that's going to be the case here. I think whoever did hold on to these guys can ride them to the championship here.
Yeah, there's been, and the questions at the beginning of the season too were, is Hines going to take away touches from Taylor because he's more important in the passing scheme? Is Taylor going to be trusted with a full workload because of his fumbling problems? Blah blah blah. All those questions are very much in the rearview mirror. They've found a way to get the most out of both these guys, opportunities for both these guys, and they've both been quality fantasy players here down the stretch. And of course, the great matchup against Houston. Henry, your thoughts on these two particular players here?
Yeah, I'm very excited about Nyheim Hines, and Coach said it, Jonathan Taylor, too. Taylor's a top 5 back for me this week, and I might be a little overzealous, I guess, but you look at what David Montgomery did to the Texans just last week. It's every week. Running backs going up against Houston are an appetite well, I guess I went wrong on that. Whatever I was going to say there, but
some clever saying.
Yeah, no, I got a little too cute, but they're satisfying fantasy owners who start them for sure. So I'm excited about that. The other guy, as I X'd out of the article here,
the other guy would be Wayne Gallman.
Wayne Gallman, yeah. So that was one interesting too. When I was ranking, I thought that he was a little low for consensus sake, and so I have him up higher than they do. I also accidentally closed out of my rankings, so I'm just a mess this segment. But I do like Wayne Gallman as well. I think last week was an anomaly when we look at the Giants, and I said it before. As far as them trying to get back on track here this week, it's going to start with the defense, and the ground game is going to be the other avenue they're going to need to take to try and take pressure off of whichever quarterback is under center.
And by the way, the Colts did play the Texans. I'm looking right at it, and I still couldn't come up with it. The Colts did play the Texans just 2 weeks ago, and both Hines, and Taylor combined for 30, almost 40 points, 38.5, almost 39 points. And that was just 2 weeks ago. Houston certainly hasn't, gotten any better in the last 2 weeks. And like I said, the Colts are going to be trying to solidify not only winning their division, but playoff seeding as well. So I would assume we get the same type of performances out of these two guys. So I like them a lot. And then Wayne Gallman, we've already said our pieces on Wayne Gallman. So I think these are fantastic choices here that you made for the article, Coach. By the way, I tweeted out a link to the article, or if you want to follow along for the rest of the article or reread anything, you can do that at flurrysports.org. It is right on the homepage currently. We are sitting Ezekiel Elliott against the 49ers. And all running backs on Monday Night Football, which would be mostly Gio Bernard and James Conner, as well as their backups, who you probably really wouldn't be considering starting anyway. Gio didn't have a great week last week, had a pretty pivotal fumble. And James Conner, you talk about a guy, you said, Myers is living off of that game from a bunch of weeks back against the Jets. James Conner's living off of the hype that he made after all the way back when Le'Veon Bell left. James Conner stepped in. They had that good season. He put up like 1,000-yard rushing season, and everybody's like, oh, screw Le'Veon Bell. We don't need him. We got James Conner. And then in the following years after, James Conner has not been that same back, has dealt with a few injury matchups, just goes out there and has very low numbers some weeks randomly when you really think he has a good matchup. So James Conner he's another one of those tough guys to really depend upon on a week-to-week basis. So let's break it down to those three main guys: Ezekiel Elliott, Gio Bernard, and James Conner. Henry, we could start with you here. Start wherever you'd like with reference to these guys here.
Yeah, sure. We do have a couple more questions, too, once we get done talking about these backs. So as far as rankings go, because now that I've got them back up here, I have Gallman at 16. I'm kind of bring the running back segment full circle here. I had James Conner 19, Elliott 20, Hines 23, and who's the last one we're looking at? Oh, Bernard, he's well off the picture. So, yeah, I agree with Coach on both these calls. I think Elliott, if you're at this point in the season with him, which I feel like most Ezekiel Elliott owners are probably bounced just because of how much of a disappointment he's been this year and the draft capital you probably spent on him. If you're at this point with him, though, I feel like you have to start him, and I don't love it, given how tough the Niners are against running backs in fantasy, top 5, less than 20 per game to the position, and we already know Tony Pollard's going to kind of mix in and get a little of that as well. I like Tony Pollard a lot going forward beyond this year, actually. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out there, but I don't think there's much of a ceiling. And then looking at the Monday Night Football backs, if this game gets away from the Bengals and the Steelers are kind of running the clock a little more, I could see a case where James Conner gets a fair amount. I think Pittsburgh's able to score in this game. They just need to bounce back offensively in general. One of the ways to do that would be kind of a more balanced approach. And so that's why I had him at 19. And then I did find Bernard way down at RB 40. I'm just not interested in Cincinnati whatsoever at this point. Tyler Boyd, maybe if you're desperate in deep league, but that's about it.
Yeah, Ezekiel Elliott has probably put the nail in the coffin for many fantasy owners across the league. Unless you let him go back in like week 6, 7, somewhere in there, and were able to get something back for him and piece something together. He probably was a very, very, very big anchor to your team this year. And anchor not in the traditional fantasy sense, but anchor is in he's pulling the whole team down. I'm doing some quick math here, which I'll get back to you with, but I am one of those people who took Zeke Elliott pretty high in the draft. I have a buddy who it's our first year in our keeper league, and he kept Zeke, and he's got one of the worst records in the entire league. So, Zeke has not been your friend when it comes to fantasy this year. Coach,
Only my brother would be in the fantasy
With
semifinals
Zeke, yeah.
with Ezekiel Elliott as his like main running back.
Hey, it it happens, I guess. Stranger things have happened, but Zeke, especially from week 7 on, just has not been the kind of player that you need him to be. Coach, your thoughts on James Conner, Ezekiel Elliott, and Joe Mixon, if you'd like. But I kind of agree. I mean, there's really nobody except for maybe Tyler Boyd that you're liking at this point of the fantasy season. But Tyler Boyd went and got himself kicked out of the game a couple weeks ago or last week, whenever that was. Put up 14 points in the first half before that, though. So maybe you consider Tyler Boyd, or otherwise I'm off the Bengals as a whole. Chat us up about these running backs.
Yeah. So as far as the Ezekiel Elliott pick, man, that's a long ways to fall off there from a top 5 pick to now at this point of the season. It's week 15. You're playing to make the Super Bowl, and you're looking at benching him. But if you are in the playoffs, still kudos to you because you've made some very good in-season moves. I get it if you have to start him. I think the volume is still going to be there. He's going to, if you're looking at not a very good second running back, perhaps you have to start him. And maybe the same thing with Conner too, because the volume will be there. You can always hope for them to fall into the end zone, and then you might return value. Conner he had a great spot last week there, and he did nothing with it. He had 10 carries for 18 yards. This Pittsburgh team, I don't know if they can run the ball. It's been a few weeks since they've run the ball. They've lost a couple of games in a row, and they've looked like the run is just something that they aren't able to get established. I was actually just pulling up the rushing yardage by team, and they are second to last in the league in rushing yardage. Houston has 1,121 yards. Pittsburgh is right there at 1,158 yards. This is Pittsburgh. This is smash mouth football where they deflate the ball in the second half and just run it, as they squash games with their defense. They have Roethlisberger back there throwing it 50-plus times a game in a kind of a spread them out, glorified run and shoot offense. This isn't the same Pittsburgh we're used to. Maybe James Conner, he had COVID a couple weeks ago. Maybe he's recovering a little bit, feeling better this game. The other thing, too, is he missed practice today as well. So if you are looking at possibly having to start him, you better make sure you got Benny Snell in the wings there, and hope that you don't have to start him either.
Well, the other thing is too, when you're playing on a team with so much talent on offense, especially at the wide receiver position, and Big Ben has been slinging the ball around this season. Why would you revert back to your running back who has been unreliable and has been below average for the entire second half of the season, basically? So I think through the air is where the Pittsburgh Steelers are finding their success. I think they're going to probably continue with that recipe for the rest of the season. So I'm avoiding James Conner. It's exactly what I said. He is one of those guys where everybody loves James Conner. He's got a fantastic matchup. Then boom, 1.8 points. He just loves to disappoint when it comes to fantasy. And just to figure out or to finish up some thoughts on Zeke Elliott. This man needs Dak Prescott is what I've come to find out. A, to just care about the game in general, it seems, but B, to make the most of his opportunities and the most of his success. If you look at his usage, it has not really gone down from week. So I'm splitting his season up from week 1 to week 6, and then week 7 through week 15 at this point. His usage has not really gone down all that much, but his production sure as heck has. In his first 6 weeks, only one of which he played without Dak Prescott, he put up 122 fantasy points. In the following 7 weeks, again, without production or without usage really going down that much, he's put up 57 fantasy points. So literally less than half of fantasy points in the following 7 weeks as he posted in the first 6 weeks. And he only had Dak weeks 1 through 5. And then week 6, he had his worst performance of the season up to that point with 12 points. He followed it up with 3 consecutive single digits, 1 pretty good 19, and then 2 out of 3 more single-digit games. He's just not getting it done. He just doesn't care. They're out of the running for the playoffs. Like you said, I think if you have him at this point, I think you're trapped into starting him, but I don't love it at all, especially against San Francisco.
And one more comment, he kind of looks like an Ewok.
He does kind of look like an Ewok. My dog also looks like an Ewok, so there's a wide range of comparisons when it comes to Ewoks. Star Wars characters in general. It's funny how many people kind of look like Star Wars characters. But, yeah, like you said, I think he's just lost interest in this season, and he needs Dak Prescott, and I think that's even more of a reason for the Cowboys to keep Dak Prescott, because if they're planning on keeping Ezekiel Elliott long-term, look at the last 7 games of this season, and that's what you're going to get without Dak under center. So if we see both these guys back in Cowboys uniforms, or if we see Zeke back in a Cowboys uniform, I think Dak's got to be there with him, or otherwise he's just going to become a very, very, very average and disappointing guy. All right, let's move on here. Actually, Henry, you said you got more questions. Are those about running backs?
They are not. Bobby Schmerda, he said it's kind of an affirmation at this point because the game already kicked off, but he said he was starting Tom Brady over Justin Herbert. Wondered if that was cool with us dogs. I said I think I'm pretty cool with it, and I don't know if you guys have anything else to add. We kind of talked about Brady earlier.
Yeah, again, ship has sailed. I think it's last week where they, just like last week, where they both are comparable. They both have pretty good matchups, and they both ended up scoring within like 0.3 points of each other. I think it could be another week like that where they both have, fine performances, and it really won't be that much of a deficit either way. We talked about Tom Brady earlier, and I think we all agreed that we like his matchup this weekend. So yeah, I am all for that Tom Brady decision.
All right, cool. And then the other one was Spencer again, tight end talk. And this one, I'm going to be curious to hear what you guys have to say because I have them ranked right next to each other. Tyler Higbee going against the Jets or Jared Cook against the Chiefs.
Oh, boy.
And I have them tight end 18 and 19. So it's splitting hairs for me. I mean, the matchup doesn't get any better for Higbee, but I don't know.
Yeah, Higbee just hasn't – he's come alive recently, but he hasn't had the production all season long on the same basis that Jared Cook has. Cook went through a pretty bad dry spell weeks 9 through 12. He only scored a total of 4.6 points over those 4 weeks, but has had 2 good weeks following or the last 2 weeks against Atlanta and Philadelphia. Do either of you have it in front of you? What does Kansas City rank against the tight end?
I have them giving up roughly 14.5 fantasy points per game, so that is the 8th worst. And, of course, the Jets are a full point over the Browns for being the worst against the position, over 17 in PPR.
Boy, this is a tough one, but, I mean, Tyler Higbee, again, just hasn't – he has 2 double-digit performances all season. I mean, is that the guy you're really wanting to bank on, even if it is against the Jets? I don't know. Like, Tyler Higbee's been such a disappointment. And there's just so many places to throw the ball on that Rams team right now. That is very tough. I think the Saints are set for a bit of a bounce-back week, and Jared Cook might see some action there. I don't know. I'd probably just gut feeling roll with Jared Cook. I think he's got probably a little bit higher, slightly higher of a floor, and I think he's found the end zone more. Tyler Higbee had a 3-touchdown performance all the way back in week 2, but since then he's found the end zone one single time. So just as a gut feeling, I would probably say Cook.
Yeah. I was just doing a little
Jared Cook has scored a
here.
touchdown in each of the last 2 weeks, and he has 6 touchdowns total on the season. And again, Tyler Higbee's touchdown numbers are pretty skewed. 3 of them came in one game back in week 2. So really, 1 touchdown over the course of the last 11 weeks. So yeah, I'm going to say Jared Cook here.
Yeah. So I'm just looking to see one other thing here. What's the latest on Drew Brees?
That I honestly don't know.
Looks like it depends on how the week goes. So he's still very questionable. If Drew Brees plays, I think Jared Cook is the choice for sure. I still think I probably lean Cook. He's caught touchdowns his last couple games. Just looking at target-wise, both of them can kind of disappear from the game plan at times. I think that there's a very real chance the Rams do not throw the ball in the fourth quarter. I think that the Saints and Chiefs, that game could turn into a shootout. The Chiefs are actually pretty solid too against wide receivers, so I could see some.
That's the point. That's the point I was just about to bring up. Is they're 8th worst against the tight end, but they're pretty good, covering the deep man, covering the wideouts. So just by default, Jared Cook might get some looks that way.
Yeah, so I think I would also go Cook, and I think it's a slam dunk if Drew Brees plays. I think Cook probably moves up to even a tight end 1 in rankings. I'd lean Cook.
Does anybody have any idea how ESPN can have Tyler Higbee ranked as the 19th tight end and Jared Cook is the 20th when everything about both of their seasons screams that Cook has been the better tight end? How is he ranked a spot behind? I'm not quite understanding that. He's blown him out as far as total fantasy points. He's blown him out as far as total touchdowns. Again, that's a little bit skewed because of the 3 touchdown performance. He has more catches overall. I think he has maybe less yards overall than Higbee, but I'm not sure how you can rank Cook lower than Higbee at this point of the season.
Yeah, I try not to get too tied up in projections when I'm looking at a platform like that. ESPN, Yahoo, Cam Akers last week, Yahoo had him projected, I think not even 10 points, and I gladly started him being projected to get crushed and pulled off an upset. So I try not to look at too much of that stuff. But yeah, I like a lot of the points you guys are saying, and I think you've talked me into Jared Cook definitely in this situation even more than I was very much 50-50 just reading the question and kind of looking at what I already had drawn up. Coach, you asked about Drew Brees. As of this morning, Sean Payton said he has a ways to go, and then this afternoon a different report said that he's taken a few first-team reps in practice this week. So I would say it's not ruled out just yet. I think Taysom Hill will start this week. I would imagine they want to play it safe, but then again, they have now coughed up the lead for the number 1 overall seed because Green Bay has the tiebreaker, and so this game is huge for New Orleans and Kansas City both if they want a playoff bye. So it'll be.
I'm just not sure that Kansas City is the team that you want to bring Drew Brees back against. Everybody's making so much out of this, the shootout, and he's going to come back, Brees versus Mahomes, and I'm not sure that you want him coming back against Kansas City. I would say, Taysom Hill hasn't been extraordinary, but he's been very serviceable, and he's been getting it done in many different ways, and he's only lost 1 game. I would say maybe you're hey, this is your last hurrah, before Drew Brees comes back. go out there, get a win against the reigning Super Bowl champions, and that's going to bode well for you the rest of your career, whether it's next year as our starter or, playing for a contract somewhere else, whatever it is. Like, if you can put a win under the Chiefs under your belt versus bringing back Drew Brees, who's coming off injury, a major injury, and just hasn't been in the swing of things for weeks. I'm just not quite sure that the Kansas City offense is who you want to be dueling with on your first game back after breaking 11 ribs or whatever it was. So, I think they honestly might be better off with Taysom Hill this week anyhow. And then you roll Drew Brees back out there against Minnesota and Carolina to end the season. And you give him an extra week to make sure he's fully healthy. That's kind of just how I would play it. But again, I'm not Sean Payton. I've never won a Super Bowl. So, maybe he knows better than me. Maybe. Let's keep moving. Unless, did you have any final thoughts there, Coach?
Yeah, I was just thinking the only other thing to add is why Brees might get rushed back is that if they are really trying to get home field advantage for the playoffs here, but definitely they intend on going deep into the playoffs, so probably don't want to risk it if he's not fully healed.
And again, the Packers own the playoff. Or own the tiebreaker. So basically you have to win out and hope that the Packers lose at least one out of the following three. Then you're still going to be tied. Then you would win it straight out. But I don't know. That's just tough. Be like a matchup against the Chiefs. You probably had that one circled all year long. Now it means so much more. But again, it's like, are the Packers going to lose any of their upcoming games? I wouldn't bank on it. They're playing Carolina. Tennessee is the one question, and then Chicago to end the season. Maybe Chicago in Week 17, if they're still playing for something and the Packers are not. Maybe we see Tim Boyle in that game, or very possibly not, because the Packers may need to win that game to solidify the number one seed as well. So I don't know. It's a tough choice right now for the Saints, but I'm not seeing the Packers, guaranteed to lose any of these games. So I would just roll out my best option against the Chiefs. And right now, from my point of view, my best option would be Taysom Hill, the guy that's been under center for the last bunch of weeks in a row and has been able to win most of those games. But obviously, Drew Brees is he's a Hall of Famer. Sean Payton, knows him very well. He knows what he can handle. So if we see Drew Brees out there on Sunday, that means he showed something in practice, and Sean Payton trusted him more. But Sean Payton is obviously a big Taysom Hill guy, so I think he might, give him the benefit of the doubt, give him that one extra week as well. All right. We already talked about our one sit in the game, which was, everybody except for Keenan Allen from tonight. Let's wrap up the sits, and then we'll wrap up the stream talking about the two starters, because I think we'll have a bit more to say about the starters. Coach, you've just got Jaguar and Ravens receivers as a whole, I believe, being benched. So a couple different games here where Coach says, just stay away. There's nobody for us here. Another one being the Jags and the Ravens. Hollywood Brown had a nice little night on Monday, but now he's on the COVID list. So you take him out of the situation here, and you don't really have a whole ton left to work with. Gardner Minshew may be getting the start again. I would think, he came in and played well, so he'll probably be starting against the Ravens. But I don't know. I think the Ravens roll in this one, and they get it done really without having to sling the ball around too much here. Yeah,
and as far as DJ Shark, I had him in the sit last week as well. He's really only had 2 games this year where he's had wide receiver 2 or better value, and both of them he was a top 5 wide receiver, but the rest of them he's been, outside the range of even sometimes wide receiver 3. So Minshew may look his way a little bit more. Baltimore secondary, despite what Baker Mayfield did to him on Monday night, is pretty tough. I think they were still just kind of reeling from all of the illness and time off practice and such. So I think they'll be in much better form against the Jaguars here this week. I think about the only wide receiver that I would have any interest in is Willie Snead's kind of interesting in DFS. If you're looking for a cheap wide receiver or flex, I think he's pretty low price. He's right around 4,000 on DK, which I think he becomes the default number one here, and I think that he would have a pretty decent volume coming his way. And I think Mark Andrews becomes a pretty good play at tight end because of all these guys with Marquise Brown out. And it sounds like Miles Boykin might be out as well, depending on I can see he was in close proximity to Marquise Brown, so there's a possibility that he might be out as well. So,
yeah. So, I don't. It's pretty much a lot of self-explanatory reasons there. I think you laid it out pretty nicely. Again, I think this is maybe more DFS choices or DFS possibilities rather than season-long fantasy. If you are leaning on these guys heavily, you're probably likely not, in the running for a championship right now. So again, this is pretty DFS based. Henry, any quick thoughts on Jags versus Ravens wideouts?
Yeah, no, Coach, I think pretty much touched on all of it. The only thing I might add is I like DJ Chark more now that Minshew's back under center as opposed to Mike Glennon. I think the rapport Glennon had with Colin Johnson, that's not there with Minshew. So I like him more, but he's still only mid to high 30s for me in the rankings this week.
Yeah, if you've got either one of these guys that we're about to talk about, obviously roll with them instead. And those guys would be T.Y. Hilton and Deontay Johnson. I think T.Y. Hilton, pretty much everything that we said about Hines and Jonathan Taylor earlier goes for Hilton as well. He gets a very favorable matchup against the Texans. I think that the Colts are going to roll as they did 2 weeks ago. Hilton had 110 yards and a touchdown against the Texans 2 weeks ago, and 2 out of his last 3 weeks he's finished as a wide receiver 6 or better. And Deontay Johnson, despite, some bad drops and a lot of them, he keeps getting looks. It seems like Big Ben wants to force feed him the ball, wants to find him out there. Even with those drops, as Coach mentions in the article, he still ended up tying Juju Smith-Schuster with 7 targets. And was able to pull a few of those balls in. And they're playing the Bengals. Again, a lot of these matchups, I keep saying it, but it's these late season matchups in division against subpar teams. And I think the good teams are going to prove that they're the good teams and just kick the crap out of the Bengals of the world here. So it should be a decent day across the board for Pittsburgh receivers. But I guess, Coach, give us a little bit more detail here on Deontay Johnson and then finish up with T.Y. Hilton. Is there a reason that you like him more or less than maybe one of the other wideouts in Claypool or Juju Smith-Schuster?
Yeah, to me, the separation's kind of taken place in Pittsburgh. It was kind of tough to decipher who the number 1, 2, and 3 were there for a little while, as far as Claypool seemed to be getting some run. But over the last few weeks, it's really Deontay Johnson. Now, he was benched this past week before halftime, so his snaps went down, obviously. But Juju and Deontay are just on the field so much more than Claypool. And Claypool's had a few big games, but the guys that you want to start, that you really want to be banking on at this point with the high floor are Johnson and Smith-Schuster, at least in PPR for sure. And then Claypool's more of a kind of roll the dice. You might get a big game, but I don't think the floor is as high as with Johnson or Smith-Schuster. But Roethlisberger, when he locks onto someone, that's a good place to be as far as a fantasy wide receiver. And he's locked on to Deontay Johnson. He likes him. He gets the targets. Even when he had 2 quick drops last week, he came back and was targeted 5 times in the second half. So I just think you have to lock him in as a wide receiver too. T.Y. Hilton, for a while earlier this season, I thought he might be done. He had really fallen off quite a bit. It looked like this wasn't a team he was going to be a focal point on anymore. It looked like this was kind of transitioning to be more of Pittman and Campbell and Pascal. Looked like they were kind of more taking on the leading roles here. But over the last 3 weeks here, he has been white hot. He has, wide receiver 15, 6, and 5. He just faced the Texans a couple weeks ago, had 110 yards and a touchdown against them. Texans are terrible on defense. I think the only thing stopping him is if the Colts just get out to a big lead running it and run the ball the whole second half. But I just think him and Phillip Rivers make for a nice little starting duo in DFS lineups this week, I think, as well.
Well, there's so many rumors going around right now about, quarterbacks that are going to be on the move and where Sam Darnold going to end up and all this and that. And I've been saying for months now that I think the Colts would be a great landing spot for Jameis Winston, and I think T.Y. Hilton would thank his lucky stars if he gets Jameis Winston. I think he could really resurrect his career and boost him to like an every week dependent kind of starter again. But again, those are all just hypotheticals right now. Henry, any final thoughts here on either one of these guys as we wrap up?
I agree with all the points. I have Hilton as my wide receiver 16. That's ahead of some other notable names like Tyler Lockett. I don't love that matchup going up against Washington. I have Metcalf downgraded as well for what it's worth.
I heard Tyler Lockett has only finished as in the top 30 in wide receivers in the past 8 weeks or something like that. It was something wild.
Very boomer bust this year for Lockett, whereas Metcalf's been more stable, but it's hard to love any of them this week. And then even next week, I believe they have the Rams. So that was a point that Trevor was making on the show last night, and I'm inclined to agree. Just doing rankings here this week, that's for sure. And then Deontay Johnson, I have him at 23. He gets so many targets, and he kind of had the yips here the last couple of weeks with some of these drops, but he'll get it righted around, and I think Cincinnati's a good opportunity for him and Pittsburgh as a whole to right the ship.
Yeah, and with young receivers, drops can often be something that plagues them early on, and then they move on. DK Metcalf had a few bad drops last year. Obviously, Marquez Valdez-Scantling has been criticized and nearly crucified here in Wisconsin for a few of his drops, and he's been fantastic in the last few weeks. So obviously, drops are especially if you're in yips category, drops are something that can just plague you so badly, but they're also something that young receivers seem to be able to get over for the most part.
Yeah, one thing, I was just pulling up Tyler Lockett's game log, and boy, when he hits, he's been wide receiver 1 as far as number 1 overall wide receiver twice this year. Week 3 against Dallas, he had 9 catches for 100 yards and 3 touchdowns. And then week 7 against Arizona, he had 15 catches, 200 yards, and 3 touchdowns for 53 PPR points. But yeah. Now, aside from that, though, from week 7 on, so week 7, he was the wide receiver 1. Week 11, he was wide receiver 10. He hasn't cracked wide receiver 2 any other week, with the exception of those 2 weeks. So he's the ultimate kind of boom bust. You might get that week winning upside, or you might get a floor that's pretty low.
Yeah, which is not the place you want to be at if you're trying to make stake your claim as one of the top receivers in the league. You got to break that top 30, But I don't know. Obviously, Tyler Lockett has all the talent in the world, just hasn't been he's been overshadowed and outplayed at a few different points this season. Any final thoughts overall you guys want to provide, or otherwise I think we gave the people quite an informative stream tonight. Thank you to those of you who asked us questions. Feel free to ask us more throughout the week. Coach, any final closing thoughts here?
Hopefully we see everyone back next week, and everyone's in the championship that's been listening to us, and hopefully we steered all the people with questions right.
Yes. Hopefully I didn't. I don't. At least my defensive call didn't cost your brother anything last week, Henry. But hopefully that's not even going to be a concern this week. Any parting thoughts for us? Parting wisdom from you, Henry?
Nope. I guess my team was just that bad that it didn't matter that his defense got him -1. So, yeah, no, I thought it was a good show. Covered a lot of talking points, some deeper names, some top flight names. So hopefully, can score some more victories here and cash in with some glory next week.
Yep. And for me, it's all about beating Henry in the Dynasty League here now. Like I said, I gotta get this early Dynasty win because I think my next season or even 2 seasons are gonna be pretty brutal in that league. And now that I'm the commissioner of my One Money League, and everybody Venmo'd me at the beginning of the year, but instead of setting the money aside, I just actively used it. So now I got to scrape all this money together to pay out because I was banking on winning the whole league. So I just didn't have to pay anybody back. So now I got to get like $350 together to pay off all my friends. So I could really use the Dynasty win to pay off my other league as well. But anyway, as mentioned, good luck to all of you out there. Thanks for sticking with us here tonight on a bit of a longer stream. We got one more coming for you next week, and then I think that'll probably be it, as most leagues do not run into Week 17, and if they do, you can tweet us your questions and things like that, but probably not going to be hosting a full stream. So catch us here next Thursday. Wait, what day is Christmas next week? Oh, that's not Thursday. That's later in the week. Yeah,
Friday.
Thursday is Christmas Eve, actually. So we're going to have to talk amongst us. We'll put it out there. Maybe we do the Start Sit show a day early. We will get that figured out and let you know, and have Zach tweet it from the main Flurry account as well. Either way, we'll make sure that we get a show for you at some point next week. So I'll save my Merry Christmases until then. Thanks for being with us tonight, and Coach Henry, thank you as well for being here. Enjoy the rest of Thursday Night Football, and we'll talk to you later. This has been the Thursday Night Fantasy Start Sit Show, brought to you by Flurry Sports, presented by MonkeyKnifeFight.com. Go sign up. Use that promo code Flurry, $5 free in your account at sign up. All right, thanks. Have a great night, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Have a good
Calling all cause we got another victim, cause my love has become an affliction. What did you expect from me? What did you expect from me?